There is a document that appeared on the Senate Legislative Council website at 11:47 last night. It stayed online for exactly 9 minutes before being pulled. But in those 9 minutes, 3 congressional researchers downloaded it. And what is inside that document explains why, at this very moment, the United States government is operating without a functional chain of command. I need you to subscribe to this channel immediately and turn on notifications, because what I am about to show you will not be on cable news. This is not speculation. This is not analysis. This is a documented constitutional crisis unfolding in real time. Before I tell you what is in that document, you need to understand 3 things that happened in the last 18 hours that the media is not connecting. A security briefing that invoked continuity of government protocols, a market signal that only appears before wars or coups, and a legislative maneuver that allows Congress to bypass presidential authority entirely. These 3 things happened independently, but they are preparing for the same scenario: a president who cannot or will not be controlled by constitutional limits. Let me walk you through exactly what is happening. Wednesday morning, 6 a.m. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff convened an emergency meeting at the Pentagon. This was not on any public schedule. This was not announced to the press. But 3 defense officials confirmed the meeting happened, and they confirmed the specific phrase that was used: continuity of government protocols. Now you need to understand what that phrase means. Continuity of government is the constitutional mechanism designed to preserve governmental function during catastrophic events: nuclear war, terrorist attacks. The last time this phrase was invoked was September 11, 2001. It is not used casually. It is not used for routine briefings. When military leadership requests a review of continuity of government protocols, they are preparing for a scenario where normal chain of command might collapse. That meeting happened at 6 in the morning. 3.5 hours later, 9:30 a.m., the bond market opened. Treasury yields spiked immediately. Now, for most people, bond yields are abstract financial noise, but for institutional investors, they are a risk barometer. And Wednesday morning, something unprecedented happened. Goldman Sachs circulated an internal memo to major clients. The memo was leaked within hours. It contained one phrase that made every seasoned trader freeze: institutional risk assessment elevated to Category 4. Category 4 is the highest designation Goldman Sachs uses. It is reserved for 2 scenarios: war or coup. Not recession, not political uncertainty. War or coup. That memo circulated at 9:30 Wednesday morning. 4.5 hours after that, 2:00 p.m., Senate Majority Leadership invoked an obscure parliamentary procedure buried in Senate Rule 22. This rule allows the Senate, under specific emergency conditions, to fast-track legislation without presidential signature. The modification was filed quietly, no press release, no floor speech, just a procedural notation in the congressional record. But what it does is critical. It creates a pathway for Congress to act unilaterally if the executive branch becomes unresponsive or dangerous. 3 separate branches, 3 separate actions, all within 8 hours, all preparing for constitutional breakdown. Now let me tell you what that 9-minute document actually said. The official title is Memorandum on Presidential Authority Limitations During National Security Emergencies. It was drafted by the Office of Senate Legal Counsel. This is a nonpartisan office staffed by constitutional lawyers whose job is to advise the Senate on legal boundaries of power. The document was issued at 11:47 Tuesday night. It was pulled from public access 9 minutes later after the White House counsel objected. But those 9 minutes were enough. The memo is divided into 4 sections. Section A is titled Constitutional Authority Analysis. And this is where it gets technical, but stay with me because the technicality is the point. The memo breaks down Article 1 versus Article 2 powers. Article 1 grants legislative authority to Congress. Article 2 grants executive authority to the President. But here is the question the memo addresses. When those 2 articles conflict, which one wins? The memo cites historical precedent going back 72 years. Youngstown Sheet and Tube Company versus Sawyer, 1952. This case is critical, and I need you to understand why. In 1952, President Truman tried to seize steel mills during the Korean War. His argument was national security. The country needed steel for the war effort. Workers were striking. Truman issued an executive order taking control of the mills. The Supreme Court said no. Even in wartime, even for national security, even with noble intentions, the president cannot act beyond constitutional authority. Congress controls commerce. Congress controls domestic policy. The president cannot simply declare an emergency and override that authority. That ruling has governed executive power for 7 decades. Every president since Truman has operated within those boundaries. This memo is citing Youngstown as precedent for the Senate to override presidential emergency declarations. Not advise, not consult. Override. Section B addresses emergency powers curtailment. The specific language states, the Senate retains authority to nullify emergency declarations by simple majority vote. Now, this directly contradicts the National Emergencies Act of 1976, which grants presidents broad discretion to declare emergencies. So you have competing legal frameworks. Which law supersedes? The memo argues that congressional authority under Article 1 cannot be permanently delegated away. Even if Congress passed a law giving presidents emergency powers, Congress retains the constitutional right to reclaim that authority at any time. But Section C is what caused the panic. Page 7, paragraph 4. I am going to read you the exact language. In circumstances where executive actions threaten constitutional order, Congress possesses inherent authority to temporarily suspend military command transfer pending judicial review. Read that again slowly. Military command authority transfer. The Senate Legal Counsel is preparing a legal framework to remove the president's command of the armed forces. This is not hypothetical. This is not academic legal theory. This is an operational memo providing constitutional justification for Congress to take control of the military away from the commander-in-chief. That paragraph made the White House pull the document. Before we continue, I need to tell you something critical. What you're watching right now is information that powerful interests do not want you to have. The fact that this memo was pulled in 9 minutes tells you everything about how sensitive this is. If you want to stay ahead of this story, if you want to understand the constitutional mechanisms at play before the mainstream media even acknowledges this is happening, you need to subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that notification bell. Turn on all notifications. We are not funded by corporate interests. We answer only to you. And in the next 72 hours, this situation is going to move faster than cable news can process. You need to be here when it does. Now let me show you what nobody noticed in Section D. Section D contains a list, 14 names, all Foreign Service officers from the State Department Office of Legal Advisor. These are not political appointees. These are career professionals who interpret international law for the United States government. They have served under Republican and Democratic administrations. Some have been in their positions for 20 years. And on Wednesday, all 14 submitted resignation letters simultaneously. The Office of Legal Advisor does not resign. These are people who stay through transitions, through controversies, through partisan fights. Their job is to provide legal guidance regardless of who occupies the White House. When they resign together, they are sending a message. We cannot provide legal cover for what is coming. The State Department exodus was not the only bureaucratic revolt. At the Pentagon, Joint Staff lawyers circulated internal guidance Wednesday afternoon. The subject line read, "Distinguishing lawful from unlawful orders." Now, this is a document that exists in military legal training. Soldiers are taught that they have a duty to refuse illegal orders. But this guidance does not circulate during peacetime to senior military lawyers unless leadership anticipates receiving orders that might be illegal. The memo was not sent to junior officers. It was sent to flag officers and general counsel, the people who would have to decide whether to execute or refuse a presidential directive. That memo circulated Wednesday. Then came the intelligence community. 5 agencies simultaneously declined to provide the White House with access to sensitive, compartmented information. The reason cited was concerns about appropriate handling. Let me translate that bureaucratic language. They do not trust the president with classified intelligence. When the CIA, NSA, DIA, and 2 other agencies independently decide to withhold information from the commander-in-chief, you are not watching political disagreement. You are watching the national security apparatus conclude that normal information sharing is too dangerous. The permanent government is protecting itself from the elected government. And this brings us to the Senate Republican calculation. The meeting in Mitch McConnell's office Wednesday morning included 6 people. McConnell himself, who has 38 years of Senate institutional memory. John Thune, the minority whip, whose job is counting votes and knowing exactly where every senator stands. John Barrasso, the conference chair who manages party messaging. John Cornyn from Texas, facing re-election in 2026 in a state trending purple. Mike Rounds from South Dakota, who sits on armed services and has a military background. And Susan Collins from Maine, who serves on the Intelligence Committee and receives classified briefings that most senators never see. Before this meeting happened, something else occurred Tuesday night that changed the entire calculus. The Senate Legal Counsel briefed Republican leadership on a topic that has never come up in modern Senate history: criminal liability for members who enable unconstitutional acts. The specific statute cited was Title 18, United States Code, Section 2384, seditious conspiracy. Now, this law is typically used against militia groups and domestic terrorists. But the legal counsel walked through a scenario. If senators vote to expand emergency powers and those powers are subsequently used to suspend elections or deploy military against civilians, and senators had reason to know those actions were being contemplated, they could face personal criminal liability, not political consequences, not losing elections, criminal prosecution. Let that sink in for a moment. Senate lawyers told Republican leadership that voting with Trump on emergency powers could make them personally legally culpable for whatever Trump does with those powers. This is not about primaries anymore. This is not about campaign donations. This is about senators calculating whether defending the president could land them in federal prison. And that calculation changes everything. McConnell opened the meeting by laying out 3 risk categories: political risk, electoral risk, and legal risk. Political risk, he said, we have managed for 8 years. Primaries, angry voters, Fox News attacks. We know how to survive that. Electoral risk is higher now. Polling shows Trump association costs us 6 to 8 points in swing states. But we have survived bad cycles before. Legal risk is different. Legal risk is permanent. Legal risk does not care about your seniority or your war chest or your name recognition. Once you are indicted, your career is over regardless of conviction. John Cornyn added the Texas numbers. He is polling 4 points behind his Democratic challenger. Every single point of that deficit tracks to Trump-adjacent chaos. His internal focus groups show that Texas voters, Republican voters, do not want to defend Greenland threats. They do not want to explain emergency power grabs. They want stability. They want governance. Susan Collins spoke next. She had attended a classified intelligence committee briefing Monday afternoon. She could not share details, but she could share her conclusion. The threats we are monitoring are not just external. When a sitting intelligence committee member says that out loud, everyone in the room understands what it means. Domestic threat assessment has elevated. McConnell then proposed the letter, not a press release, not a floor speech. A formal written communication to the White House stating 3 positions. 1. The Senate will not vote to expand emergency powers without explicit constitutional justification. 2. Senate leadership will not campaign with the president unless foreign policy rhetoric is moderated. 3. If the president primaries sitting Republican senators, the National Republican Senatorial Committee will support incumbents with full resources of the party. He looked at each person. I need to know right now if you are with me on this. Thune said yes immediately. Cornyn said yes. Rounds said yes. Collins said yes. Barrasso sat in silence for what one source described as the longest 30 seconds of the meeting. Then he said yes. The letter would go forward, but signing a letter is symbolic. Here is what they actually did. Thursday morning, 8 a.m., Senate Resolution 47 was filed. The official title is Resolution to Affirm Senate Authority over Emergency Declarations. Now, most Senate resolutions are ceremonial. They name post offices, they honor sports teams, they express non-binding opinions. This resolution is different. The operative language states, notwithstanding any declaration by the executive, the Senate retains plenary authority to nullify emergency powers by simple majority vote, effective immediately upon passage. That phrase, notwithstanding any declaration by the executive, is constitutional dynamite. It means the president's opinion is irrelevant. His objections carry no weight. His veto cannot touch this. Here is what this resolution actually does. First, it creates a fast-track process to overturn any emergency declaration. No committee hearings, no extended debate, no procedural delays, a simple majority vote, and the emergency is void. Second, it requires only 51 votes, not 67. This is not a treaty. This is not a veto override. This is the Senate exercising internal rule-making authority that the Constitution grants exclusively to the legislative branch. Third, it takes effect immediately, not after presidential signature, not after judicial review. The moment the Senate votes yes, the resolution is law. The constitutional basis for this is found in Article 1, Section 5. Each House may determine the rules of its proceedings. This clause gives the Senate absolute authority over its own procedures. The President has no say. The courts have no say. The Senate is constitutionally self-governing on internal rules, and the Supreme Court has repeatedly affirmed this principle. United States versus Boleyn, 1892. The Supreme Court held that each House of Congress has plenary power to establish its own rules. Nixon versus United States, 1993. The court ruled that Senate procedural votes are political questions beyond judicial review. The precedent is clear. The Senate can pass this resolution and no other branch can stop them. Let me pause here because you need to understand the magnitude of what you just heard. The United States Senate is preparing to strip emergency powers from the President of the United States, and there is no legal mechanism for him to stop it. This is not political commentary. This is constitutional law playing out in real time. And if you are not subscribed to this channel, you are missing the only place breaking down the legal architecture behind these moves. Go down to that subscribe button right now, click it, hit the bell icon. Because what happens in the next 72 hours will determine whether the constitutional framework holds or whether we are entering uncharted territory. The mainstream media will cover this as political drama. We are covering this as the constitutional crisis it actually is. Now let me show you the vote count. 17 Republicans have committed to supporting the resolution. All 51 Democrats, including the 2 independents who caucus with Democrats, are on board. That gives you 68 votes. You only need 51. This is not a close call. This is not a squeaker. This is a supermajority coalition that makes the outcome certain. And here is what makes this genuinely unprecedented. Trump can rage on Truth Social. He can threaten primaries. He can call them traitors and rhinos and swamp creatures. He can hold rallies and demand loyalty and invoke his base. None of it matters constitutionally, legally, procedurally. He has zero power to stop this vote. The Senate just created a mechanism to strip his emergency powers, and there is no legal avenue for him to block it. Executive orders do not apply. Presidential vetoes do not apply. Even if he declared a national emergency to stop the Senate from voting, the Senate would vote anyway and nullify that emergency under the very resolution they are passing. The constitutional architecture gives him no move, and this is where it gets genuinely dangerous. When authoritarians are cornered, they do not surrender quietly. History shows us 3 patterns. Richard Nixon faced certain impeachment in 1974. He resigned, but only after the Saturday Night Massacre, after firing the Attorney General, after attempting to shut down the special prosecutor investigation. He escalated before he capitulated. Boris Yeltsin in Russia, 1993, faced a parliament trying to limit his power. He shelled his own legislature with tanks. Recep Erdogan in Turkey, 2016, faced a military coup attempt. He purged 15,000 officers, arrested 50,000 people, and consolidated authoritarian control. The pattern is consistent. Resistance triggers escalation. So here are the 3 pathways from this moment, with honest probability assessments. Scenario A, capitulation. Trump backs down. He moderates the rhetoric. He claims he forced the Senate to respect constitutional limits. He declares victory and moves on. Probability, 15%. This scenario requires Trump to accept defeat gracefully, which is inconsistent with every behavioral pattern he has demonstrated over 5 decades in public life. Scenario B, legal guerrilla warfare. Trump challenges the Senate resolution in federal court. He argues the Senate exceeded its constitutional authority. He instructs executive agencies to ignore the resolution. He declares the Senate action illegitimate. He creates a competing legal framework where his emergency powers remain valid. This creates constitutional chaos. Two branches claiming conflicting legal authority. No clear answer about who is actually in charge. Probability, 60%. This is Trump's historical pattern. Create legal ambiguity. Find one sympathetic judge. Get an injunction. Appeal to the Supreme Court. Drag out the process. Delegitimize institutions while claiming to defend the Constitution. Scenario C, extra-legal action. Trump declares a national emergency under separate statutory authority. He invokes the Insurrection Act to deploy military domestically. He argues the Senate is staging a legislative coup and he must restore order. The Senate is forced to choose between immediate impeachment or acquiescence. Probability, 25%. This is the nightmare scenario, and it is not impossible. And there is one factor nobody is accounting for. While this domestic crisis unfolds, the international response is happening in real time. Thursday morning, 3 a.m. Brussels time, the NATO Military Committee convened an emergency session. The agenda item was listed as United States Political Stability Assessment. Let me be very clear about what this means. NATO has never in 75 years held a formal session to assess the political stability of the United States. America is the cornerstone of the alliance. America is the guarantor of Article 5 collective defense. When NATO leadership questions whether the American chain of command is stable, the entire post-World War II security architecture fractures. Subscribe to this channel right now. The next 72 hours will move faster than any cable news network can process. I will be breaking down every development through the lens of constitutional law, not political theater. Hit that notification bell. Turn on all notifications. This is American constitutional history being written in real time, and you need to understand exactly what you are watching. The Constitution is being tested. The only question now is whether it holds.